Hey vlog, so this is probably going to be a really quick video because it's late. I had a long day at work and there's terrible lighting anywhere I go. So I'm probably just going to sit down because maybe that'll make it slightly easier to see me, maybe not. That way, I guess, sort of not helpful. Anyways, yeah, quick video because it's a lot later than I intended to do this and long day at work, so that's fun. But actually, what we're talking about this week is culture and culture shock, and I guess I've never really had a whole lot of a culture shock because I grew up in, I was raised with two different cultures, in the sense that I had a very, I guess, American culture, a very Southwest American culture when I grew up, but also the fact that I grew up with Mexican culture because my mother's Mexican, so I was raised within the two confines of the, well, not like confines, I think that's the wrong word, but like within the two cultures, and so I've seen my mother's culture and been raised to know more about it than necessarily other cultures. Though also being very much in a household where it was about looking into different cultures and seeing how, or seeing different cultures and not seeing them as necessarily lesser or anything. So I don't know, or like astonishing, I don't know. Like I just, just kind of growing up with the understanding that different places do things differently with a different understanding of how things go. And so, I can't ever say, I don't think I can ever say I've had really a culture shock, except, I guess maybe the moment where I realized how much my mom meant that, growing up, anything that happened here, she didn't really get, or like, didn't have as big of an impact until 10 years later, but like, now that's not quite as true, thanks to the internet and like other things that have changed, sort of, but just in general that, but like, with her talking about that, so, was the first time when I was older and I realized when we visited Mexico to see family, was that a lot of the houses don't have air conditioning. And for the particular part of Mexico that I go to visit, it gets...
Fucking kidding, right?
No, I'm not kidding.
They don't have air conditioning?
They didn't have air conditioning.
Forget California, those people need help.
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, it's changed now. I mean, some places, depending on where you go, you can, particularly for their tourist places, you'll find a lot more air conditioning. But where I was, a lot of the houses are fairly old, so none of them really have air conditioning. All they have is this really old fan that goes on, and it gets where my mother's from and where all our family, all her side of the family is from. It's kind of hot in the summer, so it's and a little bit humid, not too bad, but it's really interesting going from Vegas, and being used to the heat, but being able to retreat into the house where it's not too bad, and then suddenly going somewhere where there's no retreat from the heat. You just have to like have ice and like wear tank tops and things. So I think maybe that was the biggest culture shock, but I don't even think I would consider that a culture shock. It's just kind of like one of the realizations of the difference of situations in different countries, I suppose. And I don't believe I've ever been anywhere else other than Mexico and the US. I think we talked about this before with travel, so I still want to head out other places and kind of get to experience it. But it's definitely a very different experience in both cultures and stuff, and seeing places differently. But I never really had it as a culture shock. I always thought as this is the way like, this is just how life is there versus how life is here normally, and, that kind of thing. So, yeah, though I think kind of one of the things that Kevin brought up that I think is really interesting is just kind of the idea of subculture, and necessarily whether or not you can have a subculture shock type idea of things being different than what you necessarily expected. But I can't really think of anything else I wanted to say about that, because I mean there's a whole lot of subcultures within even our society, and the way like you go between subcultures, or like you join, or you either grow up in one, or I guess whether or not you consider growing up in one or like being introduced and being included into one, depending on your definition of subculture, of a culture or subculture. Um, I guess. But I think that's about all I have to say because I can't really think of what else I wanted to say about this week's topic. And again, I'm really sorry that most of me is just shaded and dark. I'll figure out the lighting and stuff next week when I work less hours and should have better timing for next week's video. So until then, see you, Lug.